a strong online audience, hopefully, listening us from Turkey and from other locations. Today, we will be discussing the sustainability contributions of wind to the climate change. Our topic for today is wind energy in the race against climate change, and we have gathered to discuss the rapid and significant developments in the energy sector worldwide, and also some specific discussion will be about Turkey, and we will be together with the pioneers of the industry in onshore, in turbine manufacturing, and in the grid part of the business. There is a significant impact and effects on climate change, which is affecting our economy, our lives, and we are trying to, as the industry, we are trying to contribute to the sustainable future of the world and of our industry, of our lives. Wind energy is at the heart of this transformation as a clean, sustainable, and economical option. And as part of the discussion, Turkey is an active part of this global effort. Our target for 2035 in Turkey is to reach 120 gigawatts of wind and solar capacity, which demonstrates our determination in contributing the energy transition in this field. However, increasing this production capacity alone is not enough. So it's not only megawatts that counts. To reach these targets, we must take significant steps in areas such as grid integration, predictable capacity allocation, supply chain security, and definitely for the financial sustainability. In today's panel, we will discuss the global grid and equipment investment needs, which is required for this transformation, then the challenges we face, and how we can overcome these challenges. At this point, the contributions of the companies are quite important, which are coming from the significant players that we have among us, who are the world leaders in their fields. So, Ms. Maxine Gavi from Hitachi Energy, with her expertise in energy technologies and grid solutions. Morten Dryholm from Vestas, with his vast experience in wind turbine technology and sustainability strategies. And Karl Heiremans from Jandanul, with his success in development and implementation of offshore wind projects throughout the world. So they will be sharing their valuable insights with us. So without passing the discussion, I want to start with Maxine Gavi from Hitachi about their perspectives considering the COP commitments in tripling the renewables capacity by 2030. How do you think it is practical to think of achieving the rollout at that level by 2030, and also the efforts to increase it further? So is it the megawatt that counts?
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. Look, the goals are ambitious, but they are doable, and it's a fantastic goal to have. I think what we have in the past focused on is on the generation capacity in megawatts. And there was a delayed reaction to really look at how do you get those electrons to the consumer. And this is where if you look at the grid infrastructure, it's lagging behind. And we've had several discussions also throughout this event. In order for us to meet the targets, the 2030 targets, we have to spend about $600 billion per year on the grid infrastructure, refurbishing it, but also building out the grid infrastructure. It's a very high number. It's astounding. However, it's doable. And I think we can bring this together and enable the objective of COP. There are a lot of barriers, of course, just like when you're taking on such an extensive project. But those are also addressable, and I think we have a lot of the right people also at COP to come together to address the needs. But absolutely, it's look, we have technology is actually not the barrier, but it is the supply chain has become a challenge. Workforce has become a challenge. Permitting has become a challenge. The interconnections have become a challenge. So these are all of the things that we have to overcome. And I'm confident, and as a company, we believe that we can overcome those by coming together, collaborating, sitting around the table with all the stakeholders, including the regulators and the policymakers to help enable tear down those barriers so that we can meet our objectives. So absolutely, we're investing in a way that we want to achieve the targets and support it.
Thank you much. I mean, as you mentioned, it's not only one single parameter that's affecting. There are lots of parameters that's affecting the contributions of wind, contributions of renewable to the energy transition, and we have to focus on all these parameters and try to enhance the capabilities in all parameters so that the sustainable contribution of wind will be in the right place and can complement the developments. There, I want to switch to Morten regarding, I mean, as one of the pioneers in the wind industry and as an experienced professional in marketing, communications, and sustainability. I mean, how do you envision the role of wind energy as part of Vestas or as part of the wind industry? How do you envision the role of wind energy in achieving global climate goals? And what kind of strategies does Vestas have in leading these efforts, both in onshore and offshore? Because you are not an onshore player only, you are also very strong in onshore. So what kind of strategies do you have at Vestas to contribute?
Thank you first and foremost. Fantastic to be here. And as I said, I've been here to the COP since COP.
So you are a very experienced COP professional, by the way.
You can say that. I'm getting, sorry, targets inflation.
Yeah.
Yes, basically, I'm getting tired of targets. That's what I'm trying to say, because it's so great to see policymakers get together and announce big targets for wind. I mean, a good recent example from Europe is the North Sea offshore collaboration between 9 countries. They like to meet every year and reaffirm their now 450 gigawatt offshore target, but there's no plan. And all these elements that you've just listed up, there's no plan for how do we get there. What about the grid plan? What about the permitting? What about the port build out? What about all these elements that has to enable getting to the targets? And we don't really get into that. And that's when you ask me about Vestas and how we try and contribute, we try and be here and be practical. I mean, we have been building turbines, putting them on the ground and in the ocean for 40 years. We know what works, we know what doesn't work, and it's now it's really down to getting down to business and becoming practical about all these targets. That's the only way forward. And in Europe, we have a particular problem that onshore wind turbines are so hard to get built anywhere at this point in time. China is booming, the US is booming because of the Inflation Reduction Act, but in Europe, we have created a gigantic bureaucratic system that basically stops a lot of the onshore build out, also offshore build out. And that's what I mean. We have to start talking about what is holding us back. And when you start peeling off the layers, it comes down to simple things like getting an approval process done in a municipality, for example. And why are they not approving it? Well, because of a bird somewhere, or because they don't have staff. that are professional enough to do it. It's down to that level where we have to look at it and be practical. And that's what we try and represent investors. And of course, we are happy to have dialogues with all governments around the world to bring those experiences forward.
Let me maybe elaborate a little bit on that. It's as you said, it's not only targets, because there are lots of different parameters that is necessary for us to reach to those targets. As I was trying to touch base while I was asking the question to Maxine, it is not megawatts only. There's grid, there is supply chain, there is financing, there is human capital, there is the professional workforce that we need, and lots of others, permitting, for example, and lots of other sub-parameters for permitting. All these are necessary to be, and then they need to be in place so that we can reach those targets. And then if we have those in place, then the targets are meaningful. So this is not much different for offshore, by the way, but there are other issues which are related to offshore projects. So to my then question to Carl, based on the answers on the questions and your experience on offshore, what are the key factors for the successful execution of, not successful targets, but successful execution of large-scale offshore installations? Because we know that those projects take ages to reach, to develop, and another age to complete. How does Jean-Benoît and yourself want to contribute?
Well, yes, it's not that much different. It takes ages, and maybe one of the reasons is that it takes ages to build out the capacity to build them. I have prepared some slides. I don't know if they're already there. Yeah. So first, a slide a little bit what we do. We are actually an offshore construction company. So we build infrastructure at the sea. Yeah. And now you have to think about ports and islands and whatsoever. And in the offshore activity, we started off first for oil and gas, but already 30 years ago, we saw that there's a huge market. And one of the reasons is coming to those COPs, you learn that once they put targets, and that's a good thing about targets, that creates a market. Because once there's a target, you know, if you're going to invest in those expensive things, I have work for the next future. So we have worked out during the last 10 years, spent around 2 billion in a fleet to build offshore wind farms. And that means installing foundations, installing the turbines on top, your turbines, the other turbines, plus installing the cables. And
can you keep it a little close?
Yeah. And obviously the vessels, they got always bigger. And that's where I think, besides target, there's also a problem in offshore. Turbines, every 5 to 7 years, they come up with a new category, a new generation. They're bigger. We need a bigger vessel to install. That means we have to start from zero. So in 2019, we ordered this vessel, Voltaire, which at that time was the biggest vessel still today. But very soon, others are following, and I'm afraid we read again that new turbines will come. I hope it's not true. I know not from Vestas, but from China and from others, we hear and we see things. But we went on with this. We also invested in an installation vessel for foundations, Les Alizés. And I'm even going to show you maybe in the meantime a film. This is something amazing, but these are tools that are costing more than 400 million. Imagine that we could only use them 7 years and we would have to build the next bigger one in our generation. So it's something that we have to be aware of. That's difficult. So first of all, we need those big tools. That's for sure. But we should have a lifetime, an economical lifetime of 15 years. And then, yes, do these things. What we are doing good is build the latest technology, having them equipped like they should be, and then they should be very efficient. Serial construction, I call it, like you do the serial construction of building of your tools. That's what we think that's the future, to speed up then the quantity installed per year.
Yeah.
I think you're making a super important point here, also related to your question before about how we meet the tripling. It doesn't work if we constantly come out with new turbines. We've had some kind of a disease in my industry where every other year we had to spit out a new larger turbine before we even had captured the capex that we put into the development of the last turbine. And that has caused a lot of problems, both for us as OEMs. You can see how much we've been suffering in this industry, for you guys, for a lot of the sub suppliers. So we are out very aggressively saying, investors, let's pause a little bit here. Let's breathe. We have a 15 megawatt turbine. That's what you get. And the whole idea now is to scale, standardize, and create efficiencies so we can utilize that platform and create lots and lots of turbines rather than coming up with new concepts all the time.
Yeah, that has been a significant problem for many years. We have that race a little bit slowing down in the past few years, but we are observing turbine race to restarting again, as Chinese turbine makers are also coming to the West. So the turbine sizes in like 5-6 years ago, when onshore were about 8-9 megawatts, now becoming 14-16 megawatts, and we are observing about coming onshore like 4-5 now became 7-8. Most probably they're going to become about 10 megawatt or 12, 15
but at
megawatts.
least I can say that the more mature Chinese players, as far as I can see, they're also starting to call for this now, right? Because it's not a healthy development to constantly develop these new turbines. So I think the Chinese will understand at some point.
So everybody is suffering because of the change. It's supply chain, it's the engineering, it's the auxiliaries, and supporting industries. Everybody needs to change and adapt.
Well, it is also a reason why it's difficult to take the decisions to do this kind of investments, which stops advancing. And once we have finally decided, it still takes us 4 years to have the vessel ready to operate.
So it is becoming always difficult to support the development and contribute for the sustainable transition. So that's one of the challenges as you rightfully raised. From there, I'm going to take to you, because wind turbine is developing and growing, and there we have supply chain and other problems. But your part of the industry is more, in terms of size especially, it's more robust, growing as much as the turbines are growing. So, next, supply chain bottlenecks, technological advancement, and well-related. Okay, actually, this is so. But there are such problems, and there are other enablers and catalysts to overcome those barriers. So, critical problems can you raise? Can you help on the grid?
So first of all, I can relate to what you're talking about because yes, the size of a wind turbine may not directly impact us, but the fact that as an industry we
Right.
don't have.
We will keep closer. I guess that's gonna happen. Yeah.
So the fact that as an industry we're not where we have standards for interfaces, standards for the projects, that means everything is a one of a kind. And even for us, that becomes an issue because the projects are getting larger. And as they're getting larger, they're becoming more challenging. And we're talking about whether it's not really so much the technology challenge, because we can roll out the technology we have today. But if we're able to repeat projects, have standards, and actually repeat the projects, we can deploy much faster. Right? We can deploy much faster. We can build scale. It will have an impact on the overall supply chain. We don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. So I think there's a number of different topics. We don't have to also, if it's your supply chain all the way to the component, but also in terms of resources, you don't have to retrain people on new projects and new requirements. So I think as a whole, we need to decide as an industry what's more important, scale or innovation. They both go hand in hand, because we do have to innovate, but we have a technology that's fairly mature. It's been proven. We need to continue to build this at scale and rapidly while we continue to innovate instead of coming up with new requirements constantly. So I think that's one of the catalysts and one of the things that we absolutely have to focus on. And I would, and again, that impacts the supply chain from a capacity perspective, but also from a resources perspective, because at the end you have to deploy these projects. It's not just about having the equipment, right? You really have to have people who would deploy the projects. And the other thing is planning. The short-term planning, those days are really gone. We have to move from a project mindset to a program mindset. We have to think long-term, holistically, and plan the entire power system in a way that's feasible, so that we're not just talking about 3x deployment of generation, but we're also really looking at it all the way from transmission and distribution, and how that's consumed. Otherwise, we'll just, we get rid of one bottleneck and we create a couple more, and in that case, no one wins.
I believe that's quite related with the policy advocacy. I believe that's significantly related with the policy advocacy, and connecting the targets with the development parameters, with all development parameters, and my question to Morten is going to be, based on your experience in public affairs and with the engagement with the government institutions, how does Vestas engage with the governments and other stakeholders, which are key for the regulatory matters and strategic policy making? What is your communication, and what's your expectation from these institutions, from the governments?
Yes, we have quite a sizable public affairs team in Vestas, and of course, to me, it's not big enough. But I think generally in the industry, we need to become better. We need to become better at lobbying and strengthen our industry associations. We are up against an oil and gas sector that has times 50 what we have in terms of resources for political advocacy around the world, and we are seeing a whole host of new types of misinformations that are hitting us, and generally we are seeing more and more sort of negative rhetoric around renewables, and we have to become better as an industry. And I'm saying that and looking at myself as well. We have to become better as an industry to join that political discussion. We're doing what we can with the team we have in Vestas, but the basic message I send right now to Europe is try and copy the US, if I can simplify it, because what the US has done, and then leave Trump aside, with the Inflation Reduction Act, it has been sort of a miracle, because it is underpinning not only a huge growth in demand for renewables, but it's also supporting the supply side in a different way because of the credit system that is in the Inflation Reduction Act. And that model is just beautiful. And it is driving the US towards a place now where they can start matching China in terms of supply chains and renewable development. Now let's see what Trump does. That's another story. But in Europe, we have a chronic structural problem because we don't have unity in Europe. We don't have one energy union. Brussels do not have tax legislation, so they can't copy the Inflation Reduction Act tax mechanisms. And there's basically a lack of unity in terms of how to deploy technology in Europe. And that means that not only are we losing out on demand in Europe, we're also losing innovation and technology because a lot of that is now being invested in the US instead, right? So I think that's my particular concern right now. That is Europe and how we get, a fast forward mechanism that can become the IRA of Europe. I have big expectations for the Clean Industrial Act that is on the verge of being announced from the Commission. So I think it's starting to move, but that's the big conversation we have right now. That's Europe.
Thank you for elaborating about the Clean Industry Act and IRA, the contributions of in the United States, and the competition, maybe disadvantage that it created between Europe and the United States is huge. We are observing significant investment flow towards the United States. And I mean, feeling that in Europe and also in Turkey, but that's not only on the industrial side. There is also the environmental part, so the social responsibility side. There, I believe, Carl can elaborate a little bit on. I mean, not only it's clean industry as mentioned, but you can mention about clean construction and responsible construction. What kind of problems do you envisage there, and what do you need? What do you need to be? It needs to be done in the coming period to overcome such problems, which can hinder the development in offshore.
Yes, in offshore, yes, the vessels. Don't forget that our vessels are mainly running on oil. Sorry? We cannot run them on hydrogen. That's going to be problematic. But we are looking at methanol, green methanol. So our next vessels, and first I have to go one back. We ordered just 2 new cable laying vessels, and Maxime, you told that not much changed. If I look at our vessels, 10 years ago we were installing typically cables of 3,000 tons. Now we have built vessels which can carry 27,000 tons in one trip. Why is this needed? Well, because the cable distances are getting bigger. We're looking at future of more and more interconnectors, not going over a couple of 100 kilometers, but thousands of kilometers. If you look like projects that are on the table from Morocco to UK, 3,500 kilometers, and there are going to be multiple of those cables, so DC cable systems, and that's why we're building this kind of vessels. Now, when we built these vessels, we were looking at fuels that would be sustainable for the future. We still believe that methanol is a transition fuel, but so the vessels can run on diesel. Mostly we run now on biodiesel, recycled biodiesel, and in the future they will be able to run on methanol. I'm not sure if we will have already in 2027 sufficient methanol, green methanol available to do the first tests. That's going to be a challenge. And maybe something else that we also do in our projects, and that's more related to the project. We're looking always if we can incorporate in the project, in the construction, something, an added value for nature. For instance, around the foundations of those turbines, we have to install quite a lot of rock. Now, this can be a perfect substrate for a new life. We're working, for instance, at this moment in Belgium on a project where we will reinstall an oyster reef. Not to eat the oysters this time, just to leave them, because historically there were oyster reefs at the front of the Belgian coast. Just by fishing and other activities, they disappeared. We're trying now on a project to reinstall them around and in the future wind farms. So you see there are plenty of opportunities, I believe, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
I mean, thank you for mentioning about responsible investments, responsible offshore investments, because as you mentioned, it's not only wind or other investments that are obstructing or creating problems for the environment. As long as it is done in a responsible manner, in a protective manner, it can even protect the forest, pasture land, ocean or seabed, etc. So there are lots of issues that wind can contribute, while it can contribute to the sustainable development, to the generation of clean energy. So it's not only electricity generation or energy generation. There are lots of other issues that we can contribute while investing for wind in a responsible manner. So that's why we need those regulations, well thought, well planned, and well implemented. From your comments, I mean, we have touched base from the. I see. All right. Oh, okay. Thanks for warning. There's the antenna. So if you touch the antenna, so it disconnects. Apologies for it. So from the global perspective, I want to focus a little bit on a particular case, as maybe can also be a case study or case example as Turkey. Turkey, as the globe has significant targets, tripled last year, etc., which you don't like. Yeah, I mean, it is important to have it, as you said. It is important to have targets, but those needs to be complemented by all the other parameters that are supporting the development. Turkey recently has announced a significant change in long-term renewable targets, but this time it gets better because it's not only the renewable targets, the megawatt that counts. There is the grid, there is financing, there is supply chain and permitting, which has already been touched, and it tried to be explained how it will support and how it will complement the development. So as Turkey has aims to reach 120 gigawatts by 2035. My question, of course, to you, to Maxine, is about the grid and grid integration part of this target. What kind of specific challenges do you foresee, knowing Turkish grid, to overcome these potential challenges, and particularly how can your company, Hitachi Energy, can contribute to overcome these potential problems, which may be huge because we currently have 13 gigawatt of wind, 18 gigawatt of solar, but which in total will be four times more than the total amount, 120 gigawatts.
That's a great question. Look, first of all, the grid that we have today globally and the grid we have in Turkey is not ready at all for what's to come. So that really needs to be looked at. And what we need to have is really going back to what Morten said as well. It's really the planning. We need to plan ahead, and we need to have a grid that is flexible to be able to incorporate all of the different generation and loads that we are bringing onto this grid. So it has to have that flexibility. It has to be resilient. It has to be available. It has to be affordable, and it has to be sustainable. And so there are a lot of different elements that go into that. And the first thing one has to do is really have that holistic plan that goes further out beyond the 5 years, 10 years, goes really to 15, 20 years, and looks at what are the needs of the grid in today, in 5 years, and then in 15 or 20 years. And as a technology company, we will continue to develop. So we have deployed, solutions that, number one, when we're talking about integrating different types of renewables, the grid forming capability, the synthetic inertia. So these are all the things that you need to have a resilient grid when you have such a diverse generation coming in. And also when we go for the multi-sector coupling, we have the heat, transport, buildings as a whole, all of that is going to come into play. So we really have to have a flexible grid. So these are challenges, but they're also opportunities. And we've also addressed some of these challenges already in other parts of the world. So I think as Turkey plans the long-term power system and what the needs are over the next 15, 20 years to come, they also have examples of other parts of the world where they've already implemented some of these technologies and some of these solutions, and their best practices that can be leveraged. And I think this is really, really important. And I think as we look globally, I think everyone has the interest in sharing best practices, because ultimately we have one objective, and this is why we're all here. We want to have the sustainable future for everyone. So I think there's from a technology perspective, I would go back and again say there is not a big game changer that we need in order to deploy. We just need to deploy faster and more responsibly and efficiently.
Thank you for elaborating your views on long-term planning, which in fact needs to be part of long-term planning, long-term capacity planning. So that needs to be unfortunately, we are still having. Okay, you're here as well. The grid needs to be capable of handling all those new gigawatts that will be connected to the grid. So while we are talking about an additional 8 gigawatts on top of what we have currently, it is very important to plan it and utilize all technologies necessary, which are coming with the turbine. It needs to be complemented, but by the grid elements. So it is very important. There, I will switch to Morten about maybe he can talk about the turbine capabilities, which can support the grid, and how Vestas looks into Turkish market, how you can contribute considering these targets, and what do you expect as part of the long-term planning, which needs to be done by the
Yeah, I think turbines can become much better at supporting the grid, and I would love, for the wind parks to be part of the auxiliary markets and be able to, provide, frequency control, reserve, balancing, all these kind of things that traditional power plants can tap into. And we lack a lot of regulations in that area. But it'd be great to form some good cases in Europe. And if Turkey can go and be the front runner, and that would be fantastic. Seeing, battery systems together with wind farms to complement solar, and basically provide much more of a base load to the grid. I think, it's a fantastic place to be in right now, because we have all those technologies, as you were saying, Tim. We have them all. We don't need to invent new kit. We can actually build a fully green electricity system, even an energy system now with green hydrogen, and we're capable of doing that. That's when I started 20 years ago in Vestas. That was a complete, if I had told myself 20 years from now that would be possible, it's actually an amazing story, and I think if we can get and garner the right political will to get there, then we can fully green our energy systems and solve the biggest problem we have with regard to emissions. And it's just a matter of the frustrations of not moving fast enough. But for Turkey, I really applaud, what has been done. I see that long-term planning in what is coming. And for us as Vestas, Turkey is a fantastic market. The wind resources you have all across the country, I think, is absolutely brilliant. And if we can start thinking now on combining all these different technologies in Turkish setting and really provide that smooth power to the grid, maybe we should make that into a case. And Hitachi, and we can actually, maybe we should start looking at that and see how we can, make a fantastic case in Turkey on how to actually do that. We are trying some trial in Denmark now, where we are actually with wind farms accessing the auxiliary markets, which I think is super exciting. But we need to scale to get to that point, because we cannot run away from the fact that when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining, like we have the Dunkelcloud, I think it's called now in Germany, where there's no sun, there's no wind. Dunkelflaute, I think is the word. Then we have a problem in this industry, and we need massively to focus on battery systems, production of green hydrogen, and all these other complementary build out of grid. To get to that situation, because we have to get to that situation. We need to get coal out of the grid. We also need to look at getting the gas out of the grid. So, and we are the ones who have to deliver those solutions. So, anyways, you can hear I'm really optimistic, but I'm also super frustrated.
with your mention about the new technologies, batteries, and the other flexible flexible grid management technologies, I want you to add a little bit more about the targets and the that Turkey has put in place with the storage integrated renewables, which I pretty much trust and believe that it's going to help a huge amount of renewables to be hooked up to the grid. But what kind of problems do you envisage will Turkey and Turkish grid will face? And how can you contribute, or how can companies like you, your competitors, can contribute in the race against climate change with wind?
Well, I think there are a number of ways. First of all, one of the areas we haven't touched on yet as a technology provider is that we also deliver sustainable solutions and products, which is why we've developed a new and we've introduced and we have many customers who are now using our Econic, for example, GIS solutions. So we are reducing the carbon footprint of our products as well. So that's as a responsible corporate citizen, we have to do that as well. So these are some of the things that we're doing with the solutions that we have. Then in terms of what else we can provide, again, I think truly the problems that Turkey is going to face are not going to be completely new. Yes, every grid is unique. It has its nuances, but fundamentally, when we're talking about integration of bulk renewables into the grid, that has been a challenge that has been addressed in different ways, and that for us is something that we focus on. And I think there are a couple of different technologies that are absolutely fundamental to the grid of the future. One is power electronics, which will absolutely enable a flexible grid. It will ensure that we can integrate maximum amount of renewables into the grid. The other one is digital. Every product we have, every power system needs to become more digital, and there are capabilities that we have to leverage. And frankly, if none of us in this industry are going to be able to hire people and train people fast enough, and we're going to need to rely more and more on digital capabilities to deploy, to monitor, to do preventive maintenance, and many other things that today it's being done manually. So these are, I think, some of the things that Turkey can leapfrog and actually start implementing some of these newer technology, not new, but newer technologies that have already been deployed. And you can deploy that at scale to not only have a resilient grid, but also a grid that's ready for the growth of the future. But it's also flexible. You will need that flexibility, especially with sector coupling that's coming. And that's another part of the, I think, another element that we really have to look at. It's about moving electrons. Soon it's going to be about moving electrons and molecules. So I think you talk about energy storage, again, that's about power electronics, how you do the grid forming, and how do you, so we have a lot of different things. It goes back again to power electronics and digital capabilities, and also ensuring that you have sustainable products that you deliver to your customers to ensure that your power system is also sustainable.
Thank you. I mean, it's batteries will be new with the developing power electronics. It definitely will be a challenge to couple it to the grid, because in most of the cases, in most of the grids, the storage technologies are quite new to be integrated to the grid. But there is also other new elements especially for Turkish grid. Offshore wind, offshore technology is quite new, not only because of the mechanics and the mechanisms, but also the grid connections, and also the project development, the permits, the construction process. So on that side, how do you see Turkish targets in offshore as a potential investor developer in Turkey, and what do you expect from the Turkish authorities to implement, and how can you contribute to the development, offshore development in Turkey?
Yes, first of all, yeah, we're not new in Turkey. Yanderal has been working worldwide, so in more than 150 countries already. And it always gives us an advantage, at least that we're not new in the country. That's one thing. Second thing is, for us, it's quite usual to come in a country for just a project for a limited time. So the way we work, that helps us. But now what do we need from the countries? And I can give you maybe an example of a project that we did in Taiwan. Because in Taiwan, when Taiwan started, the first 3 projects were built by Yanderal. And I can tell you it's maybe a very good example because I don't expect so many problems happening. Oh, it's with sound. If you can cut the sound off, would be good. So there was an interesting project because it was fast-tracked. Also, the government wanted to go very fast. Jumping maybe some things you should do, but in the end it was built. We signed the contract in 2018, 2021. All turbines were running for the first project, and that was also COVID included. So, what is the challenges in such a country? It's a very good example. In Taiwan, there is nothing that you can compare with offshore activities. Not even a port, a base. And we did it anyway. So I think that if I compare then a country of like Taiwan with Turkey, I think there's much more that we can get out of the existing supply chain in Turkey. You have ports, you have shipyards, you have a lot of steelworks. I think the companies sitting here, they have activities over there, huge activities. So maybe you're not making yet the components that we need in offshore wind, but maybe the step up is easier than in Taiwan. I think still today, after almost 7 years, Taiwan is still struggling to get something produced seriously over there. Even the port activities are limited. So yes, what could be looked at? Prepare ports, get the grid connections ready at the coast. We have seen this in so many countries, even European advanced countries, that when the turbines were installed, all the cables arrived at land. They could not even start them up because there was no connection possible. So I think these are critical things. Look, if you want to have a local supply chain, don't expect this to come immediately in the first project. This is building up over time. You have to give also, I think, the industry a predictable pipeline. If you have systematically 1 gigawatt per year, things completely change for companies like us, like Vestas. Then it starts to look differently. You look at it, maybe I have to set up some local production over there. And it's the same for us, for the whole industry. I think predictable pipelines of sufficient quantities, and then it will work. If you don't get it alone, look around with the countries around your neighborhood. I think that's also a big part of the success of the North Sea. If I compare Asia again, there's quite a lot of willingness to do things in Korea, in Japan. Taiwan is already ongoing, but if you add all 3 up, it doesn't help. They all look just to their own countries, to their own possibilities. They're not interested. I already said maybe they should make the tower in one country, the nacelle in the second, and the blades in the third one. And if you add these up, there might be a business case to do this. But they all want them in their own country. So and these are things maybe you have to get ambitions, yes, in the country, but be reasonable.
My final question is to Morten regarding a potential supply chain risks and problems. Because that is, I mean, we have touched base in lots of different parameters about, I mean, talked about those. But supply chain is a global issue. I mean, wind and solar, more or less all countries are focused on this, and everybody wants to put investments on their home turf, but everybody also wants supply chain on their domestic land. So how do you envisage that to be addressed? I mean, how do you how do you think that the most optimal solution for supply chain management is going to be?
Yeah, I mean, there are many things to be said about supply chain, of course, but I just want to applaud what you said. I mean, I couldn't have said it better with regards to setting up manufacturing. We have to look at regional perspectives and avoid too rigid local content regulations. That's one of the reasons why Taiwan has been such a a challenge for everyone, because the local content regulations are not helpful. On the other hand, on the good side, there's the US, where they incentivize manufacturing through tax credits. That model I really like, because it gives companies freedom, it gives predictability, and lowers the risk significantly for the supply chain. And I think it's important to note that I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, we don't have the turbines, we don't have the supply chain, can't deliver on the targets." If you look at the wind industry historically, we have always delivered. Once we have commitments, we will build the supply chain. So just because as is, it looks like we cannot build, it doesn't mean that we won't invest. So the minute governments goes from targets to plans that are committed, then we can start investing. I cannot invest for 450 gigawatts in the North Sea that I don't know will ever materialize. That's not the way it works. It's but if they get serious about planning to 2050 and backtracking, we need this amount on each year. Here's the plan. Here's the rollout. Then we'll invest. It's as simple as that. So, and the final thing maybe to note on supply chain, is very, very important that we don't have a fully concentrated supply chain in just one country. I mean, for clean tech now, I guess 80% or so of all the kit in clean tech is being produced in one country. That's not a healthy situation to be in. So we need to regionalize supply chains. Asia needs supply chains. Europe needs supply chains. Americas need supply chains. And there is a risk right now that, take solar, for example, where everything's concentrated in one country. We have to get out of that situation, make sure we stimulate supply chains across all continents.
Thank you very much for underlining the global diversification in sourcing supply chain, because we have experienced focusing on single country or a few countries, and how it can affect the overall optimization of the industry and the costs, and it has huge impact, negative impact on the overall cost structure of the industry. So just to summarize before we complete, and if there are any questions before we take it, we underlined the importance of the targets. I mean, long-term, mid-term targets are quite important, yes, but it needs to come together with grid development, which is the main infrastructure, and the necessary technological improvements, regulation, which is going to provide the basis for the competitive electricity trade and supply. Then a diverse supply chain development throughout the world, without focusing few countries, and it needs to be diverse as much as possible. Then the financing reach, developing competitive and alternative financing resources, and reach of competitive financing sources, human capital development, and maybe another important item was the sound permitting process in terms of environment, in terms of construction and other development steps. So all these are supplementary for long-term targets and the race against climate change, and how wind, solar, and other renewable can support the climate change efforts. So thank you very much for your contributions. If there are any questions from the audience, we can take, or if you want to add a few final words, I can also pass it to you again. Yeah, there you go. I can hand over. We can take it from there.
Just before finishing, you have said that frustration, or you, I just don't remember.
Yeah.
Why you are just so wholeheartedly saying that you are very, there's a great expectation.
Keep it a bit close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just what is the frustration?
I think I'm just I'm just eager for us to get going. Impatient, yes. And I can see, what happens when you put right policies in place, like in the US right now. The amount of, clean tech, explosion we are seeing in the US because of right policies. Then when I come back to Europe and I see a lot of, misguided, policies, it just frustrates me because I want to see, I'm a European, I want to see Europe, compete and win in this clean energy race, together with Turkey, of course, because we have so much to offer. And I think Europe has been amazing in the past in innovating and developing clean tech technologies. I mean, Vestas started the entire wind industry, the modern wind industry, because of some engineers in Denmark that thought about making wind work for Denmark, and that legacy, it hurts me to see that Europe is lagging behind China and the US right now. That's my frustration as a European. Not so much that we are not going to be able to deliver and contribute to mitigating climate change, because we are on our way, and the tripling is for sure within reach. So it's not that frustration. It's just on behalf of Europe, I just hope we wake up.
Thank you very much for the presentations. My name is Geoffrey Feta. I am a member of parliament from Uganda. I have listened keenly about the beautiful discussions on clean energy for urban areas and the cities. In Africa, and particularly in Uganda, we have regional cities created, but there is no plan for clean energy. So I would like to know if you have a program designed for the benefit of Africa, and if we can be able to discuss about it. I thank you.
I think I'll start and on. Look, we're as a company, we're in more than we have presence in 90 countries and have projects that have been executed in more than 140 countries. And Africa has always been a continent that we focused on. So we certainly have programs, we have solutions, we have projects, we have people on the ground. So absolutely happy to connect you with the team that we have in Africa.
Yeah, and the same goes for me. I think it's Africa's moment right now because of green hydrogen. I think that opportunity sits fantastically well with many African countries. So I would love to touch base with you. I mean, we have shown we can do it. I mean, the Lake Turkana project, the 400 megawatt project in Kenya, for me, that I was personally involved in as well, is sort of a flagship project that demonstrates we can do this in Africa. So the more the merrier. Let's talk.
Obviously, offshore wind is not yet there in Africa, but recently I've seen some questions coming from areas where there's quite some opportunity also over there. And then also regarding infrastructure for cables, there are about 7 projects today that are being studied to bring electricity to Europe from Africa, renewable electricity. So there is definitely something moving seriously over there. It's not small, what I see, the quantities that they want to produce. So besides being used locally, do with the balancing and the time they can produce maybe when we cannot produce. They have much more sun, obviously, than we have. So these are the advantages that you have. I think, yes, it's the time of Africa to step up, I think, and also become an exporter of this commodity.
Thank you for raising the question, and thanks for answering the question. I believe developed countries have a common responsibility to help the renewable development in Africa, without letting the continent to use fossil fuel again. I mean, you don't need to use and utilize fossil fuels while there is vast amount of potential for renewable, for solar, for wind, and other sources, hydro. And as I know, you unfortunately are not an offshore country, but you have Lake Victoria. I'm not sure whether it's possible to utilize it, but hopefully onshore wind and solar would be potential sources for the regional development and also potential electricity export to the energy consuming countries. So I hope the answers are at least sufficient for you. So if there is no other question, I need to thank you for the audience, for the participation, and for the speakers to sharing their thoughts and ideas and recommendations. Thanks for answering my questions. So I believe this was a productive and inspiring panel. Thank you for listening and participating. Have a good day.